Okay, welcome everyone to the Joint Consultative and Safety Committee on Tuesday 30th August 2022. If we start with apologies for absence and substitution.
Apologies for absence were received from Councillor Scroggy and Councillor Greensmith.
And are there any substitutions?
Councillor Nayak is substituting.
Right, we start with to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of June 2022.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, just to add to that, and apologies for lateness from Councillor Miller, due to circumstances beyond her control, but she is coming.
Thank you, Paul. Approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of June. Who's willing to move that? Okay, moved by Councillor Wilkinson. Seconder? Seconded by Councillor Feeney. And if we move on to declarations of interest, does anyone have any interest? No? Then nice and easy one. Minor changes to the establishment. David Archer.
Thank you, Chair. So, an information report, standard reports. In this one, we're just reporting the single change really for leisure services. It's a report really that was not controversial in its nature, and consultation was carried out as usual with Unison prior to the changes being made. And the changes were to create one new permanent Band 2 centre attendant and 3 new part-time Band 4 leisure attendants. And the Band 4 posts, you'll understand, are there really to deliver additional swimming lessons, and swimming lessons are good for the organisation in terms of financial income, but also socially it's a really important thing that, that those posts are taking part in at the leisure centres that we have. So those changes really are just for information as additions to the establishment outside of this this full consultation committee.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm sure we get plenty. Well, we know we get plenty of bad news stories, so it's always good to highlight a good news stories, and anything that results in recruitment of additional posts is very much to be welcomed. So thank you for that, David.
So if we move on to agenda item 5, which is also for noting, which is sickness and absence, and that's David Archer again.
And hopefully the good news stories might be a bit of a theme this evening, actually, because as we go through the agenda, most of the stories are just that. So I'll try not to disappoint. So again, thank you, Chair. The second report again is just for noting. Again, standard report to bring up to date on the current position in terms of sickness absence in the organisation. We're still currently below target, or sorry, above target, worse than target. Target over the year is 9 days, as you'll see. We're running at about 11.32 days. That's at the end of June. That is an improvement from where we were in the month prior. And in terms of perhaps progress, it looks on the surface as though perhaps we have gone past some of the peak levels of absence. If we looked at June's data, only 6% of the absence of that month relates to COVID. Back in March, we looked at absence rates of about 27%. So it would seem that perhaps COVID, for a reason for absence, is reducing. And in terms of its, I suppose, impact on sickness overall, we are seeing a reduction there as well. Long-term absence also, we seem to be doing better now. Again, I would say the same thing as I say quite often, which is we do actively manage cases of long-term absence. We do work with managers in HR and also with directors to ensure that we do try to provide a supportive environment to help people return to work where we are active and we're not passive. The cases are reduced from last quarter to this quarter by 3, so we only have 3 active cases of long-term absence at the moment. Earlier in the year, it had been as high as 12. So again, perhaps reasons for that in the last year or so have been really difficult times, but it looks as though at the moment the pattern is more positive. So, Chair, the recommendation is just to note the report.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. David, I think I asked a similar question last month, and that's in respect of of long COVID. I'm guessing that it's not having an impact still, given the number of cases, but presumably you'll continue to keep a watching brief on that. As things goes on, because we know there are people still being affected more than just the week or two that would be for a standard COVID absence.
And the answer is yes. And I think you'll perhaps see in some of the press that there are occasions now where long COVID is beginning to be recognised as a disability under the Equality Act as well. So we would do anyway to look out for this sort of thing, but also in law now it starts to be a requirement to be vigilant and aware and alive to those that situation as well. So we do actively manage long-term absences and look to appropriate ways to try to get people back into work. If you're thinking of that as an example, although we don't have any current cases at the moment, we might look at if someone was in an office-based job, okay, are there ways of perhaps looking to return someone to work on perhaps reduced hours and building back up again, because predominantly those cases seem to affect people in terms of energy levels, and it's a question of just recognising that and doing positive things to help that return. So I suppose it's a long way of saying, yes, absolutely, we'll keep an eye out for those sort of things.
Thank you, David. It's you again, I'm afraid, for the current staffing issues. I think you're doing every item this meeting.
Yes, it's a treat for us all. So yes, it's me for each one of those. Current staffing, I suppose really just updating, I think, on the things that I said last time, which is we are in the midst of national pay negotiations, still waiting to hear from the unions in terms of their response to the employers' proposal. So employers' proposal really seems to come quite close to what was being asked by trade unions. For us locally, I'll pick out perhaps the couple that really perhaps the most relevant. So the first one on the list in the report, the proposal by the employer's side is to increase pay for each employee by £1,925 a year. So people on the sort of lower pay, that will mean a pay increase of just over 10%. At the higher levels, within the NJC scale, it's an increase of just over 4%. Similar offer has been made to chief officers as well. The pay award as a percentage for chief officers around about 2%, it would work out to be. So quite a, depending on your point of view, I suppose generous offer in that it gets close to the rate of inflation for lower paid employees. And the third item in the bullet point list as well, the proposal by employers is to offer an additional day's leave for all employees as well. So those things have been tabled. We're waiting to hear for a response from the recognised trade unions. I think we're looking for some response probably after the 19th of September. I think that's when the ballot closes for Unison. I imagine a similar time for GMB, but I'm not completely sure. So I suppose what I'd say is that the offer from employers doesn't completely match what was being asked for. So what was being asked for was £2,000 or a minimum of the rate of inflation for the RPI, retail price index. That's currently running at about 11.8%. So that was what was being asked for. It would seem that the employer offer does come somewhere close to that. So again, it is watch this space, I'm afraid. No news to really report, but it's just an update about where we are at the moment. Again, Chair, just asking to note the report, please.
Councillor Feeney.
Thank you for that. Just obviously, where do our bin men look in this scale? Because that's obviously where the bit of disruption up and down the country seems to be. So how is ours bin men relevant to other councils?
So I suppose I'd start with the national picture. So, I mean, you'll see on the news the issue in Scotland. So, you know, in Glasgow at the time of Edinburgh at the time of the festival, you know, there's the bins aren't being emptied properly and there's industrial action there. My understanding of that is that actually what the Scottish employers are asking for in local government is the same award as England. So my understanding is that actually they're being offered less than that. So their ambition would be to be offered the same deal as this. That's my understanding from the news this morning. I think locally, if we look at pay rates, we match, let's say, loaders and drivers in a small number of comparisons against local councils. Others pay more than us. So there are two questions. One is about the National Pay Award, and the other question is about comparability between us and others locally as well. So there are others that do pay more at basic rates. Locally? Yeah. Depends how you work an average out, I suppose. I'm not trying to avoid the question,
On strike.
Yeah.
Whether you call that local or not, I don't know.
No, I was thinking probably within Nottinghamshire, probably. I would say that our rates do match others, but are lower than others as well.
Yeah.
So that's probably the picture. So that there are probably two sides to that question, I think. National pay and local comparative pay, I think.
Yeah.
Agenda item 7, reporting of the gender pay gap.
Thank you, Chair. So, again, I think hopefully another good news item, I think. So, again, I won't go through this in detail, but what I would say is that in summary, what the information does show to us again is that we are working well in terms of gender pay gap. The appendix on page 22 covers the full report. I suppose just a couple of things that I would pick out there. And bearing in mind it's a snapshot in time, the 31st of March each year that this is produced. It's a requirement to produce the information to publish this nationally, so within the government's website and also our own. But the table that actually starts on page 23 gives a summary over time. And I think perhaps the two headline figures to pick out would be the mean gender pay gap, which is the one that's quite often the one that's published and used as a comparator. So currently we're running at 3.79%. And the median gender pay gap, which shows a minus figure, minus 1.51%, which tells us that in terms of median pay, women are paid proportionately more than male employees. Towards the bottom of the table, you look at upper quartile and upper middle quartile. That shows we have a slightly higher proportion of women in those pay brackets, if you like. So I think when you look at the information in those ways, what it suggests is that higher proportion of women than men hold better paid jobs in the organisation. And I would say that the mean figure there of 3.79% is very much within industry standards, if you like, and towards the bottom end as well. So it really is a good news story. I suppose the one risk that I'd pick out is that as an organisation we are fairly small, and it doesn't take too much by way of change, perhaps at sort of higher paid jobs to make a difference here. So there is sort of some variation backwards and forwards. But no, again, the information for the last year is encouraging, and it's not to say we wouldn't continue to work towards gender pay neutrality. We used a job evaluation scheme to make sure that our jobs are graded correctly. We use industry standard good practice methods of recruitment and selection as well. So nothing really to add, Chair. Again, happy to take questions, but just to ask that the report is noted.
Thank you, David. Just like to highlight the fact that Gedling has worked on policies to support women in the workplace. The ones that mentioned in the report are menopause in the workplace policy. But I also feel we should bring attention to the domestic violence leave policy, as that's such an unusual policy in the UK. If no one has any questions, we'll move on to agenda item 9. Sorry, my mistake. I was going through the agenda item by item rather than looking at the list. Okay, as the next items are considered to be sensitive, we move we need to move the exclusion of the press and public. Moved and seconded. All those in favour? Thank you. Can we exclude the press and public, please?